everyone. We are down at Ocean Point Marina. Today is Tuesday, the 23rd of March, 2021. I just checked the water temperature and it's 40 degrees. And I'm here today we're going to talk with Seth Barker, who is the co-owner of Maine Sea Farms.
Maine Sea Farms.
Here on the Damerscott River. So we are actually filming on the river that Mr. Barker farms. Every year Mr. Barker goes to the schools and we talk with all of you. This year, because of COVID, we're going to do it here. Please write your questions down and share them with me when you have an opportunity. So without further, I will give it over to Mr. Barker.
Well, thank you. Yeah. Well, it's a nice day here on the river. You know, this part of the river is really ocean. It's more ocean than anything else. And one of the terms that's used in marine science is this is an estuary. It has freshwater input up at the head. If you're familiar with the area up near Newcastle and Damerscott, water comes in from the Damerscott Lake, and it mixes all the way down. This pretty good tide here, about a 10 or 12 foot tide, depending on when you're here. So at low tide, things are quite exposed. At high tide, all you see is the top of the rocks without any of the seaweed and rockweed that you normally would see when you come down to the shore. Well, my name's Seth Barker, and I've been farming seaweed for about 10 years now. The name of our farm is Maine Sea Farms. We're upriver, up the estuary, out of sight, but it only takes about 15 minutes by boat from here to get up to our farm. And our farm is designed for growing seaweed. There's a lot of other things happening in the Damerscott. This is a great place for oysters. The oyster industry is really big here, and there's also some suspended cultivation of mussels that takes place right in the same location where our farm is. Well, today I'll tell you a little bit about our farming operation. I've enjoyed seeing what you've been doing with your tank cultivation and how well it's doing out here at this location. Locations make a difference when you're farming. Just as a land-based farm with soil fertility, availability of water, all those things make a difference in terms of how well your crops do. The same things apply to farming seaweed. The fact of the matter is, though, for farming seaweed, we don't need to irrigate because we have all the water in the world. Well, we have a lot of water, and it's moved tidally with tidal currents. We don't need to fertilize our farm because the nutrients that normally, if you had a land-based farm, that you would put on your crops, the nutrients, fertilizer, is in the water. And this time of year in particular is an excellent time for nutrient availability, fertilizer availability, and growth in our farm. We're growing a number of different types of seaweed. Right now, though, we're down to 3 different types, and one's called sugar kelp, the other's called skinny kelp. Both of those have been in tank cultivation in your schools, which is really neat, and the other is called alaria. Those are all brown seaweeds. We've also, in the past, we've raised some red seaweeds, and we've looked at raising, growing green seaweeds. But right now we're concentrating on primarily sugar kelp. And I'll show you a little bit more about that and how we do it. Farming for us is actually more a winter occupation. So it's just the reverse of what is done on land. In land, you know, you do your best in the nice warm summer months and everything like that. Plant in the spring, harvest in the fall. Well, we plant in the fall and we harvest in the spring. That's why I call it basically a winter crop. The sugar kelp actually does grow all through the winter, even though the water temperatures are very low. But in the coldest months, it grows very slowly. The sun is fairly low on the horizon. There's not as much nutrient availability, and it's cold, so things are happening more slowly. But this time of year, as the sun gets higher, and there are more nutrients available in the water, our crop, the sugar kelp, just simply explodes with growth, and grows very rapidly and will continue to grow for the next 2 or 3 months. We're only a few weeks away from starting our harvest, and our harvest is done from a boat. This is basically the way I'm dressed when I'm out on the boat. Got my oilskins on, got my life preserver. You know, it's essential if you're working on the water to wear one of these. This inflates if I fall in the water, so it gives a low profile and doesn't get in the way. But we're harvesting from a boat. We have 2 boats that we use to harvest, and all of our crops are on long lines. Those are horizontal lines, very similar to what you have your lines suspended from, but they're horizontal lines, and the crops, the lines are between 4 and 5 feet below the surface of the water. We could drop them lower, we could drop them down to about 10 feet, but we found at our location that having the lines at about 4 or 5 feet below the surface of the water is a good way to grow. So there are a lot of similarities between growing seaweeds and sugar kelp and land-based harvesting. I've explained our seasons are reversed; they're kind of flipped. The other thing is, when we plant in the fall, we're planting seedlings, but it's not the same sort of seeds that land plants start from. We're starting with very tiny, almost microscopic plants in some cases, and those develop through a complex life cycle, which I'm not going to get into right now, but are started on land in tanks and attached to a very thin twine. Now, this is something. This is actually the one of the fun parts of farming is seeding the lines, because it goes so fast and it's just so fun to get these lines out. I don't have any seedlings to show you, but I do have something called a spool, and I don't know if you can see this, but the spool is wrapped with a very fine twine, and for this light spool, that's actually 200 feet of twine. It's very fine twine. It's wrapped around the spool. This is what the seedlings grow on. This is what we start with. This twine. It looks fuzzy when we're planting it, and it's a fuzzy brown. because all the kelp is very small. But this is the way that we get the kelp started on the long lines. And Pauline and I will give you a demonstration about how that's done. I've got another spool here that I use for demonstration. So this one should work. So Pauline, let's see. I think what we'll do is I'll give you the spool after I get it set up.
Okay.
And I'll hold this end and let you just walk backwards.
Oh, wow.
So
I get to do the fun part.
yeah.
I like that.
So can you hold that right there for me? Just put your thumb on that. Okay. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the twine and I'm attaching it to the rope. This would be the long line that I'm not going to tie it. So this would be the long line that we grow the seaweed on. And then we just run the spool out through. Yeah, put your finger on that to sort of tension it up a little bit. Yeah. And can you see how that wraps onto the rope? Yeah. Okay. Good. And we just keep on going. Our long lines are between 400 and 500 feet long. So we use several of these spools to completely seed one long line. Yep. And that's
Mr.
it's
Barker,
as simple as that.
How does the seedlings get on to the twine?
Okay.
I don't get that.
How do the seedlings get on the twine?
Yeah, yeah.
The seedlings are microscopic, and before they become what we call seedlings, they have a mobile stage where they can move around in the water. They're suspended in the water, and they settle on the twine. So they just sort of attach to the twine, like a lot of things in the sea. They find a place that they like, and they settle on it, and then they start growing. They're still microscopic, but they start growing and attach. So that's an essential first step. That's a good question.
Okay.
How they do that? I'll give that to you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Nice job.
I'm gonna talk a little bit about a number of different kinds of seaweeds, but I'll start off by explaining what sugar kelp looks like and how, as it grows, it stays attached to the long lines. So I've got a piece of sugar kelp that's actually wild sugar kelp. It's growing all around here, and that I took off from the dock and I've got hanging right here. So let me show you this. That's a pretty big piece of seaweed, isn't it? Huh? You probably, if you've gone down to the beach, you've probably seen some of this or other types of brown algae washed up on the shore.
You want me to help hold
but
it?
this is very.
This is so cool.
Yeah, this is very typical. And there are a number of parts to the seaweed. If you look down here, I'm going to take this other rockweed off.
Wow.
Sugar kelp doesn't have roots. It has something called holdfasts. And the holdfast looks very root-like. I don't know if you can see that well, but it has tendrils that come out, and the tendrils attach to whatever is available for a substrate. In this case, it's attached to blue mussels. The mussels were growing on the dock, and the sugar kelp attached to the blue mussels. And so you can see the holdfast. From the holdfast, you go out along, and this is a very short piece. Sometimes it's much bigger and much larger. This is called the stipe, S-T-I-P-E, stipe. And the stipe is kind of like a stalk, but doesn't function the same as a stalk in the plant entirely, but it does give the connection between the holdfast where it's attached and the rest of the,
This reminds me of lasagna noodles.
yeah, it does,
Does it?
and the rest of the kelp. Now, something that's really interesting about kelp is that's the oldest part of the plant down here. The kelp is actively growing from this part of the plant. So as it grows, it just keeps adding, and the plant gets longer and longer. And as it grows older, it starts to form reproductive tissue. Now can you see that brown stripe? Pretty wide brown stripe. It's not down here. It's not down in the newer part of the blade. In the older part of the blade, it has a brown stripe, and that's the reproductive tissue. In that brown area are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of spores. And the spores are the start of the life cycle that I was talking about that results in seedlings attached to the twine. Something else I just noticed while I was talking to you here, this kelp has kelp snails. This is a snail that grows just on kelp, and it doesn't get much bigger than that. It may get twice that size, but it's a little snail that makes its home. There's a couple of them there on the kelp, and it feeds on the kelp. I don't know that they made this hole here, but often you can see places where they've been feeding on the kelp.
So that was going to be my next question. Is there what other if kelp snails like to eat seaweed? What other things in the water?
What
like
other things would eat seaweed? Yeah. That's a good question.
Fish? Because
There's
this
actually
looks like somebody's been nibbling.
yeah. Well, that's just an old part of the
that's
plant.
old?
And
Okay.
it's breaking up.
Okay.
There's actually not a whole lot of other animals in the water
Snails?
that I'm aware of that would be eating seaweed off from our farm lines or off from your experimental lines from your tank. What generally happens, so for kelp, kelp is actually quite resistant to being eaten by other things, but it does get old. It breaks up into small pieces, and these small pieces are part of the food chain. Those get eaten by any number of things in the ocean. That's a good question. I'm going to put this
I have
back.
another question.
Yeah.
So you said this is full of spores.
Yeah.
How does the plant reproduce? I mean, how do these spores get released?
What happens?
Yeah. Yeah.
At some point, when the water is much warmer than this, sometime late spring, early summer, maybe even the middle of the summer, these spores are in little sacs, and they open up, and the spores are released in a cloud into the water.
Oh wow.
So it happens at different times in different places, but it's just a matter of having a little hole that the spores can come out of, and they're released into the water. As I said, actually like as a cloud.
So is spores food for? Can spores be food for other animals, plankton?
No, spores are food for other animals. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So things that filter, like barnacles, filter
Oh, they probably love
things out of the water. So barnacles could filter these out, and clams filter particles out of the water. So clams could filter
Like bivalves.
could filter these out. Bivalves.
Yeah.
Bivalves are fairly selective about the size of things that they eat, but that's just an example of an invertebrate that is filtering and potentially could eat the spores before they actually get to grow up to be adult plants. Okay, I'm going to put this back over the side here. We've got a couple other examples here that I want to show you, and this is kind of neat because this is just sort of a first look at what's going to be coming out of the water later. These are some twine that Paulina's had in the water off the dock in the same area as your twine from the tanks, and they're really neat.
I had some left over, so I did my own drop line.
Yeah, why don't you take one end of that? Yep.
There you go.
So,
It's like a salad.
yeah, this is two different types of kelp. This is often called skinny kelp because it's very narrow and ribbon-like, but it's got some of the same features.
Yeah.
It's got holdfast, it's got a stipe, and that's the blade, yeah. And then this, of course, is sugar kelp.
That was
And again, you can see the holdfast and the stipes and the blade. That blade's broken off. Yeah, some of these are a little abbreviated. There we go. Yeah, there's a nice one right there. So, yeah. So
so
those are a beautiful golden brown color.
I think pretty.
They look healthy, and it's just a first peek at
Yeah.
what your lines may look like.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool because one of the things is appearance, right? The
Yep.
way something looks.
Yeah,
And so there's a lot going on with people really liking to eat skinny
Uh-huh.
kelp because you see how it looks so different
yeah,
than the sugar kelp.
right,
It looks a little bit like, I don't know,
right.
pasta noodles,
Yeah, yeah,
fettuccine
yeah.
noodles, rather than lasagna. But I like this. Thank you for pointing that out because remember, this is what we tied on to your line. Remember, we did drop lines. So this is my twine that had all my little seedlings on it. So I took my twine like we did, and I added it to this, and this is what I got.
It's good.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, I'm going to put that back over the
Yeah.
side. Actually, you want to put it back?
I
where
need
you
to
had
go
it?
put it back where
Yeah.
I had it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. So, you know, something that I assume we were all thinking about, and probably is a question, is well, who eats seaweeds? Around the world, seaweeds are a big part of the diet for many different countries. And in the United States, there's different types of seaweeds that are eaten by some people. Our farm has had some of its best success in terms of harvesting a crop and having a successful large harvest for kelp that was going into a snack food. So the snack food is called a Kelp Jerky. So it's sort of like the plant or vegetarian equivalent of beef jerky,
Oh,
kelp
wow.
jerky. So a lot of our seaweed has gone to that. We also have sold to quite a few restaurants in Portland and on up the coast to up past Rockland and Camden. And chefs have a very nice way of incorporating different types of seaweeds into recipes. So the seaweed itself is not what they call the center of the plate, but it's an important part of the meal that they're serving. Right now, to sort of wrap things up, most of what we're doing now is taking our sugar kelp and we're drying it. And the dried sugar kelp has a long shelf life, several years, and can be used in meal preparation just like fresh sugar kelp. So the advantage of drying is it gives you shelf life. It gives you it doesn't spoil. And so this year our crop will be not 100% but very close to it. It will be almost all dried, and then we'll sell the dried sugar kelp to places that will use it for different recipes and meals. So I use dry sugar kelp in a noodle soup that I make. I usually have dried tomatoes, mushrooms, noodles, and sugar kelp. And the other thing that I use sugar kelp for is almost like a condiment. So when it's dried, it can be flaked up, and it can be mixed with other things, and you can shake it on things like eggs, or you can put it in some soup or whatever, and it enhances the flavor. It brings a very nice flavor, and it also brings along with it something called micronutrients, small quantities of things that you normally get in other foods, but are often in good concentrations in sugar kelp. And last but not least, one of the things that is not found in most other foods is iodine. And sugar kelp is high in iodine. So take a look at your salt container, and it probably says iodized salt, or it may say sea salt, or it may say something else. Well, that's the way we get most of our iodine in our diet, unless you want to use something like sugar kelp, because that adds a quantity of iodine that's really important for as a micronutrient. Well,
so Mr. Barker, I do have a question.
Yeah.
So one of the things when I'm talking with the students, we talk about different types of seaweed, and you brought up some different types, and we talked about how the sugar kelp, how it uses the stipe and it floats to the surface, and it's its way of moving.
Yeah.
But that's the blade, use of a blade, and use of a.
Right.
So there are other kinds of seaweed that don't have blades, like this.
Right.
So can you tell me a little bit about what these things are, or what this is?
Yeah. Well, seaweeds vary tremendously in form, and this would be a good way for me to end, is just talking about some of the other seaweeds.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So what you've handed me right here is commonly called rockweed or knotweed, or ascophyllum. It has a stalk here. You can see this little leathery portion, and in the stalk it has a flotation bladder. That's what that is right there. That's the flotation bladder. Those are found along the stalk at various places. This is a good one to show the flotation bladder. There's one, there's another one, there's another one, there's another one. Well, in addition to that, this time of year, rockweed is reproducing. Remember we talked about spores in the sugar kelp, that dark stripe. Well, they have something quite different. They have these parts of the plant that also are producing spores, and when they become mature, the spores will be released in the water. So,
Oh, cool.
yeah.
All right, I found this kind too.
Here's another brown seaweed that's turning a little green actually, and it's really quite beautiful in the water. It looks kind of like a hairy mess here.
So we're attaching?
Yeah, that's the attachment point. That's the disc. It has a disc rather than a holdfast, and then it has a stalk, and then very fine branches.
It looks like angel
So
hair.
let me pull out a few other things here. This is another type of rockweed. It also has flotation bladders with little bumps, and it also is reproducing at the end here. Yeah, can you see those structures at the end? Those are the reproductive structures. Can't see in the bucket, but
Oops, sorry. I think I'm in the way. Okay. Oh, I like that.
so it's
one.
not really clear, but
I love that one.
this is a red seaweed. It's a very dark red, and it attaches with a disc. I don't have the disc, and it's branched. This one is called Irish sea moss, and Irish sea moss has a large amount of something called carrageenan in it, and other compounds called alginates. But the carrageenan is extracted from Irish sea moss, and it's used in things like ice creams and toothpaste. So whether you know it or not, you're probably almost every day you're coming in contact or using some seaweed.
And Mr. Barker, I know you can make a pudding with that.
That's right. Yeah.
Irish sea moss.
Yeah.
We tried it.
Blanche mange. Yeah.
Yeah, it was not great.
Blanche mange. Yeah.
Oh, look at that.
Look at the reproductive structures on this rockweed. Wow. That is going to be a lot of baby plants.
Wow.
Oh, this isn't looking too good. That's another red seaweed. And some sugar kelp.
Oh, this is skinny.
So, how about this one?
Oh, I love that one.
Yeah, this is another kind of kelp.
That's cool.
And you can see it has a stipe, a blade, but then the blade is divided into very long strips called horsetail kelp.
That's really interesting.
I had some green. Yeah,
Oh,
here's some green seaweed. So we talked about brown, red, and now green is the other kind of seaweed, and they're pretty easily identified by the colors. This is called sea lettuce, and it grows along the rocks. You probably, if you go out at low tide, you would find some sea lettuce growing on the rocks. It has a blade. It's folios. It's not too clear. I've got a rock here, but here's another green seaweed that is very fine and filamentous. Just to show you a different type. It's not growing with a blade, but very fine filaments. And again, if you go down at low tide, you'll probably find some of that seaweed. sea lettuce is actually pretty good, quite edible. You want to make sure that if you go foraging for any seaweed, that you pick it up in an area that's free of pollution, that's clean. So, but most seaweeds, without hesitation, can say are edible, and you know, they have different tastes, and people have different taste preferences. But if you have a chance, you ought to try some. Okay, well that.
Mr. Barker, I just have one more
Yeah.
question because it does come up. So all this seaweed is growing all around us,
Yeah.
but there are sea farms. So why do we have to have sea farms?
Why do we have sea farms for the same reason we have land farms?
Okay.
Because you can grow one or more types of crops in a fairly well-defined area, and we know what the crop is going to be. We know when we're going to be able to harvest it, and we have a pretty good idea how much we're going to need, how much we're going to get from the crop. It's kind of like growing corn. You know, we have sea farms to grow seaweed for the same reason that we have farms on land to grow corn or tomatoes
soybeans,
or whatever. Yeah,
Yep.
that's right.
Okay, great. All right.
Okay, well I'm glad I
this
had a
is-
chance to
Yes.
talk to you, and good luck with your farm here. You know, it'll be fun to see what everything looks like when it comes out of the water in a while.
Yep. We'll hopefully be harvesting towards the end of April.
Okay.
Last year we were put off, well, COVID, but also the weather. So it's very
Yep.
weather dependent.
Yeah.
And thank you so much. This is
You're quite
excellent.
welcome.
I really
Yep.
appreciate
See
it.
you later. Keith.
Write your questions down. See you later. Have a good day. Thank you. Wait, first a few thank yous to Mr. John Trees for taking this film footage. And if over in the background is Mr. Bob Crink, who has been taking some still pictures for us. So thank you all so much. I couldn't do this without you. Thank you. Bye.